and good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Futsal868 Corner Talks. Last week we had Sport and the Budget, where we looked at the Trinidad and Tobago's national budget presentation. And that led the team at Futsal868 to consider what is sport development. And being proactive as we consistently are, we decided to address it. We decided to look at, in today's episode 69, sport and development. Because all of the conversations that we had last week, it really is, what are we developing? And our guests, who, interestingly enough, I am the only Trinbagonian, but nevertheless speak the same language, will discuss sport development, sport and development, and sport for development. Hang in there. We got you. Letting you know that you're in able hands as we welcome our guests. I will not call them by their last names because we are all family. Wherever we stand, wherever we are, working for one purpose: development of sport in our jurisdictions and also globally. So I'll start off with welcoming Samia. Hi, Samia. Welcome and good evening. I will welcome my sister from Barbados, Ytannia. Is no longer Miss Wiggins. We have grown from that to now first name basis. And as he has his name, which actually influenced why I started off the conversation this way, I welcome Brother Atto to the conversation. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, brother.
It is really a pleasure to be able to have, first and foremost, gender balance and also a global voice, noting that we are speaking to sport and development, sport for development, and sport development, which leads me to my very first question. And I ask each one of you all to definitely chime in. I was actually, matter of fact, I'll start with Samia as regards to, please share with us the difference, but from your standpoint as regards to a definition of S4D, sport for development.
Right. Thank you, Jeffrey, and hello, everyone. Right. Sport for development. It's very different from sport development. Sport development is the development of the sport itself, the audience, the academies, the players, and so on. Sport for development is more up my street. It is using sport as a tool for development, whether it's economic growth, it's personal growth, or social and political growth. So this is where the difference lies, in using it as a tool to develop it rather than being sport itself being, the focal point. Yeah.
Ytannia?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. And I like what you said is the focal point, and I want to build on that, is the common thread, the connector. So sport for development is used to bring about social change, teach lifelong learning skills, and it can be used to help people reach personal and community goals. Sport development, and remember we said the connector, the common golden thread. Sport development, now we start getting into things like infrastructure, funding, pathways, programming. We think Olympics when we think sport development. We think grassroots when we think sport for development. So if we want to compare the two on the opposite end of the spectrum, that's like how I like to explain it to people.
Brother Atto, give us complete the picture first as regards to these three common terminologies that many persons misconstrue, don't understand, misinterpret as well.
Hello. So my sisters have competently explained the definitions, but I, of course, will add my 2 cents, so to speak. So I like to talk about the fact that sport has the potential to, first thing. So sport for development is exactly what my sister said that it is, but it has the potential to engage people in a positive way. The reason I think that is important is because there's often a evangelistic community within the sport for development actors who pretend that sport is a priori good. Sport can be very destructive in the wrong environment, and if not construed, or sorry, if not theorized properly, it can cause poor implementation and result in no development or even destruction. But I also want to say that there's a in between sport and development. And sport and development is what may consider the grassroots approach that my sister from Barbados was discussing. While she quite correctly said that sport development is about that part with the elite representation.
For two of the pillars of the national policy that I read last year, and this is noting that I'm speaking to the Trinidad and Tobago national policy. So guys, bear with me knowing that we have Samia from the USA who has done work in the United Kingdom, Brother Atto who is from Guyana but operates in Trinidad and Tobago, and Ytannia who is Bayesian but knows the Caribbean landscape. So I'm just going to speak to two of the pillars from the national policy of Trinidad and Tobago. One, total participation of sports, and the other one, high performance. Where do these pillars fit in when it comes to sport for development, sport and development? Back to you, Samia.
Right. In terms of the work that I have done in Lebanon and Morocco and Indonesia now, and different parts of the world really. Sport for development does not enter policy very formally yet. So it's still like non-governmental organizations that do that. It's still the schools that are slowly integrating that. But as a full integration into the policy, this still does not exist. Sadly. In terms of high performance is very different from sport for development. While we're doing sport for development, we're really talking about, some sort of growth that would take on one of the sustainable development goals, for example, like reducing inequality or poverty, or looking at water and how we use it. So high performance is not a part of the sport for development world, but it is definitely part of the sport development world. Thank you.
So I want you to go a little further, and this is the same procedure I would like for each of our guests hereafter to speak to. They not only answer a question, but speak to what you do. Give us your history as regards to involvement in sport for development, because you would have spoken to about some countries that we would have seen from the Olympic Games this year, right? But tell us more as regards to what are some of the projects that you have done, being a sport for development and peace consultant. I want you to elaborate on that, please.
Sure. My work is mainly using sport and training people to use sport to get to sustainable development goals or goals in general. With that, we build on experiences of coaches and teachers in different countries. And these coaches and teachers will go on and be multiplicators and coaches for youth, for people who are beneficiaries, some of the marginalized communities, to be able to bring about development in one way or another, or peace. There are big thematics that we work on, for example, violence prevention, reducing inequalities, inclusion of people with disabilities, the integration of migrants and refugees, health, mental health and physical health, as well as many other themes where sport is used to bring about that type of development. As I said, I've worked in Lebanon, I've worked in Morocco, I've worked in Indonesia online for an e-learning course, in the Philippines with great NGOs. And this is, my background is a bit scattered, but it's what makes kind of sport for development global, like a common language.
You said your background is scattered. Can you give us a tidbit of what that background is?
Sure. It depends on the country and its needs. There's always a needs assessment. But mainly it's about, for example, training coaches and teachers where they already have some type of foundation and baseline for continuing sport for development programs, or building curriculums from scratch for them to use, and really empower them to use sport as a tool rather than just applying it blindly or applying it without knowing what's the background of it.
You know, it's very interesting because I was a little bit late to let you guys in because I was looking at the John Maxwell's Live to Lead conference, that finished last month, but I was just looking at the recap of it. And a lot of these speakers spoke to legacy and spoke to working with purpose. And Ytannia, I want you to not only answer the question before, but tell us, how do you see sport development, sport for development, creating legacy as well as being purposeful in achieving, you know, a better, well, Barbados, a better Caribbean, a better world?
Loaded question as always, Jeffrey. Legacy is a big word and it's a big thing. And my background too is scattered. I actually came from the elite part of sport, working at the highest level as a manager for women's football. So I have that experience. I'm working at the Olympic Association. But then I'm also an educator. And I recognize that in Barbados, this is what really happened and what really took me where I went. We had a situation where youth between the ages of 15 to 24 leaving school without any qualifications or certifications. And that really was the reality of many of our youth as they were preparing to enter the formal job market. And it really puts a strain on our social systems and the wider society. So when you spoke about legacy and policy, just like others said, there's no real policy in our country as to where we fund sport for development or development of sport. And I want to say, and I will continue saying, one cannot happen without the other. And when we recognize that, we just need now to focus how we will allocate our funds to certainly bring both together to leave legacy that you now spoke about, Jeffrey.
That is very much well said. But my question to you now is, give us a little back end, a little backstory as regards to what is a Ganar? What is that organization? Why are you representing a Ganar today and not the many other organizations that you speak to?
It marries two things. It marries my love of sport and my passion for education. For me, it was where passion met purpose. So as I was alluding to earlier, many youth often are left with no other alternatives in Barbados and the Caribbean, and certainly the rest of the world, with no other alternative sometimes than to seek employment or work in the informal sector. And you guys know what I'm talking about. We're in the same industry. And what this kind of means is low pay, no real benefits, very few legal protections, and instability. So as a result, many youth in Barbados and the Caribbean are kind of unable to achieve their full potential and positively, and I want to say that word, positively, contribute to the betterment of their personal circumstances, their families, and a lot of them end up being drawn to illegal activities. So into Ganar. So the solution was sports. And the intention was to create an environment that would allow our youth, and I'm going to say at-risk youth, and I don't necessarily like to use that word, but the general public understands when I say at-risk what I mean. But I think it's a negative attachment to our youth. I don't want to label them, but for the context of our conversation. Yes? So it kind of gave them the opportunity to make good on their potential. Remember you said about the word potential of sport? And I agree with you, it's not a panacea for all good. We know this, and let's be real and honest about that. Good. So, and the Ganar program gave them a chance at a meaningful future. First of all, it's a very powerful word, and word song is important. Aganar is Spanish for let's win or let's earn. So that's what you want to do. When you leave school or when you're in a certain circumstance, you want to make money. You have to make money. How do you do that? And we have it's a youth workforce development program designed to meet exactly that need and only that need. And it's kind of led by Partners of the Americas in collaboration, well, in my country, Barbados, or Ministry of Education, and we worked with NGOs. NGOs are really what funds these programs. It's not necessarily done directly with the government. So the fact that we worked with our Ministry of Education and our Ministry of Labor was very unique for a number of players or a number of actors because it was important. So what do? We are, and I'm happy to say it because I love it. We kind of implement the program in 16 countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. So that's why, different areas, different genres. And we utilize football and team sports, very important, to provide youth with trainings, support and skills needed to secure a job or re-enter formal education, which are the two important things if you're going to develop as a young person in a meaningful society. So that's what we do. I don't want to be too long-winded, but we broke it down into 4 important phases, and I'll go through them really quickly. And the main thing is focus on employability skills, market-driven skills, vocational skills, and we do supervised professional internships. And my most favorite part is that we do follow-up. We don't just train and leave. So we do follow-up where we help them for a job-related preparation, search, and placement. And that's very important to us. It's just one of many components that's come together to help over 1,500 youth in our country to date.
That's totally amazing. And it's exactly what I've been hearing and listening to for the last 4 hours when it comes to the John Maxwell Live to Lead. One of the speakers mentioned the Make-A-Wish Foundation in the US, the fact that you bring celebrities to be a part of making a wish to a child who is suffering from a life-threatening disease, and the fact that you are able to make somebody's life better is all that matters. And I go straight to Brother Atto. Brother Atto, you are a lecturer at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and in your description of yourself, you are a sport for development consultant as well, but you're also the lead of the Caribbean Sport Development Agency. Speak to us as regards to CSDA and its work in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago sporting landscape.
Thank you, brother, for that invitation to speak to that. But I want to disclaim first, not to be a polemicist, but I will push back. In my own tradition, as my socialization teaches me to live to serve. And if that service includes leadership, then great. So I am no John Maxwell, but I am at Rockcliffe, and I am service-oriented. So to build on that, I would also like to say that I am the lead director of the Caribbean Sporting Development Agency, but here I'm sharing my own views because in this cultural space, there's often blowback for people like me who may be deemed polemicists, and sometimes my utterances can be controversial. So I'm representing myself. At CSDA, we have been doing a lot of good work for more than a decade now, and we have been working in about 13 countries. We have supported Ganar in the past. Big up Ganar. I remember the first time I heard the meaning of Ganar, I really liked the earning part, not the winning part, because I believe there are some implications for that winning mentality within the larger society. It takes us away from communal, respectful, value-oriented, moving together to winning. But I love the earning part. So big up Ganar. And so we have been working, some of our flagship programs are Kicking AIDS Out, which tries to use sport and life skills to address HIV and lifestyle diseases pertinent to sexual and sexuality behaviors. We have Jump Rope for Heart, which is a program that seeks to get people involved in physical activity, and it serves the primary school. Would they call it internationally? I don't know. In Trinidad and in the Caribbean, we call it primary school or elementary schools. We had a program called Game On, but and Game On was really about using sport or properly constructing a sporting environment to help to teach leadership skills and decision-making skills, etc. We have a program called Youth Friendly Healthy Spaces, which is a similar thing, but really going into communities and understanding their unique challenges. As my sister said earlier, the precise design is a critical factor in successful sport for development outcomes. So even in Aganar's, I'm hope not hijacking my sister's program, but even in Aganar, they have a framework, but yet it's implemented differently to ensure that it's meeting the specific needs, not using that cookie cutter approach to development, but trying to really understand the unique challenges of the particular environment and positing a developmental approach to do that. Yeah, so that is what we've been doing here at CSDA. We're advocacy. We focus on advocacy. We focus on institutional strengthening, capacity development, and program implementation.
Thank you very much for that. And as I change glasses, I'm also going to change a little focus right now, yeah? So I can see a little better. So is it very interesting that in belonging leads to buying, purpose in the purchase, influence beyond the business, and impact from the business. Samia, what impact have your involvement in sport for development and peace been? What has been your influence? What has been your purpose? And where do you get belonging when it comes to tying all of this in? Again, as Ytannia says, yes, I ask loaded questions. So again, what has been, I mean, for you, what has been your, as I said, make a wish? What has been the biggest impact for you? What has been the biggest influence for you when it comes to sport for development and peace consultant, which I want you to explain why that PIECE is there for PEACE, and again, purpose and belonging, that ties it all together.
Sure. Well, my background is in sports psychology, so I have this psychological approach to sport, and mainly saying how sport can be used for marginalized communities, for clinical communities as well, has brought in research a lot of change and a lot of good influence. You're talking about impact. Impact is a huge word, but I hope I have some positive results with the people that I work with the communities that I reach directly or indirectly from local communities and countries, or whoever is really getting to know me, going to the trainings, reading the curriculums that I build in collaboration with others. So this is the main influence for me to share that knowledge is a huge purpose for me, and that sport is such a versatile tool. It's so accessible. It's so economic sometimes. It's so easy to just set up, with a group of kids, with a group of adults, a ball, and they can come up with so many ideas. And it's a very optimistic view of sport, but it does bring some of the big obstacles that we face in everyday life down, like racism, homophobia, any type of, refugee kind of disapproval. So it does bring some communities together because it just puts aside some differences. I'm not saying it's the perfect thing to do, like it's not the perfect tool to do that, but it does have some influence in some sort. So that's for the impact and the purpose. And how do I bridge all of this together? I found this work to be somewhere where I find my own flow, and that I am able to help people to support them at least with any type of knowledge on sport for development, and they support me in knowing, as you said, Jeffrey, knowing and Brother Ato, knowing the context is so different when you come from different countries and working on such an international level. I end up learning a lot more from the persons that I'm working with, and just trying to put S4D frameworks on it rather than the other way around. Just imposing some sort of framework and going from there. So yeah, that's me. I hope I answered 3 of your questions.
Most definitely. Ytannia, coming to you, and coming to you hard with some, yeah, you know, a little politics going through in here, right? Okay, bring it on, bring it on. I like that. So on the screen is the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them. As it says, 17 goals to transform our world. Interestingly enough, they also say that this is what sport for development is supposed to be a part of. Let's bring in the actors, because sport development is really and truly based on sport and dev.org. Sport development primarily focuses on developing sports, or more specifically a certain sport. From the top down approach, we are looking at the international federations. Yes, as Sport and Dev has said. How are they actually seeing this? Are these international sporting federations? Are these national governing bodies? Are these national sporting organizations are able to marry sport for development, sport and development, noting UN Sustainable Development Goals?
If you'd asked me that 6-7 years ago, it would have been no. You're asking me that today, and I'll say less no, but still no.
Love it.
It's the truth. I mean, after 15 years of progress and towards the, let me see, the unprecedented MDGs, which are Millennial Development Goals. And I know you're talking about, the world now has turned kind of our attention to Sustainable Development Goals. And you got all 17 days. So let's talk about them. And if you think about it, that's now transitioning into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So now we're talking about sustaining it. And the goals are brilliant, and there are things to achieve. So sport for development can touch each and every one of these in an impactful way. However, in designing a program, and I can definitely speak to Ganar, we were very specific on the ones that we looked at. So we were very big on goal number 3, which is healthy lifestyles and promote well-being for everyone of all ages. Then we talk about goal 4, where we kind of ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. That one is key and very important when we talk about sport for development in certain areas and in certain programs, especially as Brother Athol spoke about it, where it's not cookie cutter. So when you look at the goals, you look at your community that you're in, you look at your program, and then you sit down and you construct, you think about the psychological aspect of it. So what I loved about Ganar, they came with a program, yes, beautiful. We have a curriculum as well laid out. We have our goals that we work on, our disciplines, teamwork, discipline, communication. You know, we have those things. Those are fine. But that does not mean that every single school, and I've worked in 9 secondary schools, 14 institutions. I've even worked within our government industrial school, which is our junior penile system, both male and female. And I'm going to be honest, each and every one of those institutions took on Ganar in a different way. But as I said, the common thread was always sport. And the common goal that we always thought about was SDG goal number 4. We needed to ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. So if that's what you're speaking about, that's what's done. Now let's talk about, and I know where you're hitting me at from the International Federation aspect of it. Before this pandemic, the conversation and linkages with the UN and NGOs were not the way it is now? Have you not noticed a change in conversation, a change in tone? And even today, the IOC President Thomas Bach at ANOC Awards spoke about using sport for development to help drive initiatives that would normally have been excluded. So the conversation is there, the linkages are there. When you think about vaccination being pushed in countries, who are we using? Are we not using sporting stars? Though, you remember that sport development? We take that to help drive sport for development. So no and yes, I think really the gauge is moving a little bit slower than we would like it to be. And I want the conversation now for our IOC, international federations, our NGB and our NC, and our NOCs in our region to purposefully include sport for development in their strategic plan, because our governments are slow to do it in our policy. As some countries cannot get sporting policy done correctly, they're not going to think about sport for development, and that's being real.
Barbados.
So we are fortunate to some extent in Trinidad and Tobago in that the policy has considered sport for development. I think largely that is where it ends. The complaint is often there's not enough investment, there's not enough resources to address some of the challenges. But I would argue there are other things that you can do to show that you're serious, because it's true in some instances, especially recently. Before the pandemic, Trinidad was experiencing a recession, and now we're in a pandemic, etc. But there are things we can do, things like legislation. So you can create a better environment to promote and encourage people to be involved in sport for development. So you can create an ecosystem that understands the value of sport for development. Things like using your resources wisely. So the government of Trinidad controls, for the want of a better word, the University of Trinidad and Tobago. At the University of Trinidad and Tobago, we have a department called the Center for Kinesiology, Physical Education, and Sport. They can invest small amounts of money, because you already have that institution set up, to help to ensure that the quality of not just sport for development, but sport development and sport and development is done correctly. And in addition to that, they can ensure that the circumstances are right to facilitate more research in these areas. Because if we are allowed to do things like that, governments will see investment in sport for development, and sport and development as a necessary condition, because it will yield tremendous returns. It can reduce expenditure on crime prevention. It can reduce expenditure on health. It can reduce expenditure in other critically expensive areas that government devote a lot of money to yearly. So I'm hoping, for me, it's still no, but I'm hoping that the climate will force governments, because the resources are so scarce, they will become more creative in the way they invest the resources. One thing I want to add to that, though, is, and both of my sisters spoke of it earlier, and they're speaking about ensuring that to protect the legacy, you invoked that word legacy earlier, of sport for development, the gatekeepers have to ensure that there's quality, there's purpose, and there's meaning. I am in the process with some of my colleagues of theorizing about a philosophical approach for sport for development in the Caribbean. And as far as I can see, there's three critical elements that is observable in any successful sport for development program. One, organic passion. So there's a real need, not a manufactured need because some organization has some money to spend on this and let's go spend it. Two, the scientific process, trying to figure out what exactly is most appropriate for this community. What are their psychological challenges? What are their sociological challenges? What is the historical context, etc., etc. And four, that's two. Three, the art of implementation. When we did some research in Jamaica, this was Dr. Oscar Mwanga, guru in sport for development. And what we realized is the art of implementation was very critical. They connected to people like my sister Ytannia and Samia. The Jamaicans would call you a roots person. That's a roots sister. That's a roots brother. In other words, you're really vested in their development. You're not trying to foist an approach on them, but as Sister Samaya said earlier, you're trying to pool their collective intellectual resources to navigate a journey out of their present conundrum to a better place of existence. And Brother Mark Mungle usually talks about um, at, underserved youth. So we are addressing the underserved youth, and that is, I guess, could be juxtaposed with at-risk youth. So I think those are some things that we need to consider if we are serious about moving forward with sport for development.
Before I move on, I would like you to repeat those three again. Organic passion.
Yes, organic passion, the scientific process, and the art of implementation.
Love it. And I hope that our listeners can write it down. Yeah, because it's very important. But before I move on from you, Brother Ato, and this is a question I'm going to ask you, Samaya, so be prepared. Before you mention those three phrases, I would say phrases. There were three things that you spoke to that I was very much that came out at me: ecosystem, research, investment, and I'll add one more: marketing. Because three different individuals, three different organizations, three different jurisdictions, or I should say 3+ different jurisdictions, all with passion. But yet, as a moderator, and probably even those who are listening, there's some things I have never heard about these projects. I never heard about these organizations. What are our shortcomings? And I want to speak to ecosystem and marketing. How do we build that ecosystem? How do we market our projects? Because for me, this seems to be more of a spiritual level, whereby go out and do. Don't it don't have to necessarily make people know that you're doing good. Your good will follow. Your legacy will see for itself. But sometimes, is it not true that if you don't know, you wouldn't be able to assist? How do we now build that ecosystem where and that will now be able to be marketed? That persons will be able to say, I know about that. I want to be a part of that. As I mentioned before, Make-A-Wish Foundation. I mean, the NBA did a wonderful job with Make-A-Wish. I think from the NBA and the NFL, they really, boosted their image. So, Barato, speak to us.
Yeah, my dear brother, you're going to get me in some trouble. So in terms of the ecosystem,
if you ask Ytannia, that's what I usually do. That's what I usually do, and it's on YouTube so people can find us. I usually do that. So I apologize in advance. My questions are loaded, but I believe in, as we say, and Samaya, bear with my twang, my Trini accent. We speak the thing.
Yeah. All right. And I'm not afraid to get in trouble. I'm not afraid to get in trouble. That's why I disclaimed earlier that I'm not representing CSDA. I'm not representing UTT. I'm representing Brother Atu. So I'm able to engage in parrhesia, frank speech, truthful speech. All right. So in terms of the ecosystem, I will go back to investment. For too long, the investment in sport for development in the Caribbean primarily came from donor agencies, so to speak. And when the thrust of your movement depends on outsiders, you're in a vulnerable circumstance. So I think Caribbean governments need to be more invested in sport for development. And again, I emphasize investment is not always money. They can invest in spending some time on making sure legislation is in place, policies in place that will help to create that ecosystem. the universities need to take some blame for that. I have been agitating my colleagues at the University of Trinidad and Tobago for us to spend some time, and we've started, but it's difficult because most of us, our workloads are ridiculous. But for us to spend some time thinking about how we can influence a quality sporting industry in Trinidad and Tobago. Because as Ytannia said earlier, it is important for young people to earn. After they sweat, they want a reward. And our students are graduating from the university with good competence and they cannot find employment, and they're moving away from working in sport, moving away from working in sport for development. And people with university degrees in kinesiology or sport management or whatever are working as policemen and firemen and sometimes even construction. And those are beautiful professions. That's not the problem. But the problem is that is not their chosen profession. So we need to do some work in that regard, thinking and investing our time, figuring out how we can contribute to establishing a proper sporting industry. And finally, there are other things I can say, but in the interest of time, finally, we need to be aware of people that experience the Dunning-Kruger effect. What is the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychologist that talks about people who recently learned something, and my sister would understand that. They're very outspoken and they feel that they know so much and they know so little. And oftentimes our society is not based on a meritocracy, it is based on a neptocracy. So you would find people, one of my friends used to say, a lot of square pegs in round holes. So people that are ill prepared to address certain circumstances are in positions of power addressing those same circumstances. And that is extremely problematic for any progress we are likely to make. So if I'm able to recap that quickly, I'm saying Caribbean governments need to invest more, not just money. So I don't want to hear that, oh, but the economy tight. Yes, I understand that. That is true. You're in difficult position figuring out how to make a dollar out of 15 cents. I get that. But there are other things you can do. Two, other important actors like myself and the universities and so on need to spend some time engaging in research activities to help to create the industry that would even sustain our own jobs, because I'm a university lecturer in the Department of Sport. And three, we need to set up some standards that will guard us against those Johnny come lately who don't understand the nuances and the rigor that creates the possibility for sport to cause meaningful change, but yet they're spewing stuff. And in Trinidad, we have experienced it. So the governments would say, we spent millions of dollars on that sport for development thing and it didn't work. With who? Who was involved? Was Mark Mungle involved? Was Lester Osuna involved? And I'm calling some names of people in the Caribbean or in Trinidad who understand sport for development. They were not involved. Was Rhonda Clark Gooding involved? People who understand or studied sport for development were not involved in those initiatives. But now the sport for development would be dismissed as a useless tool because of neptocracy. So I will rest my case there, because although I'm willing to get into some good trouble, I still need to be skillful in navigating how much trouble I get into.
So, man, with that said, he has passed on the baton to you to get to continue being in trouble. So please do tell us what's happening on your side of the world, your neck of the woods, when it comes to ecosystem and marketing, when it comes to sport for development and peace. How does it operate?
Right. I definitely agree with Brother Atto that we do lack that type of that ecosystem. It exists very implicitly for some reason. The connections on LinkedIn, the pages, they kind of give you a feel that there's a community there that's working in sport for development for the support of the communities that they are working with. Explicitly or more formally, this does not exist, which makes it very hard to track down, as Brother Atto was saying, who is an expert in this field? How can they help us, whether we are a government or an organization? How can they help us make this project work? And this does not exist, sadly. Most that go into sport for development are staff in NGOs or in governments that have been working on water and sanitation, for example, or in monitoring and evaluation. And sport and development comes as like this project where we can spend money on, and we can finish the financial year well. What Brother Ato was saying, um, what was it? The organic reason for it, for S4D to exist, does not exist in most of the project or in the countries or in the governments. It's just, let's do S4D and then people just go along. That's in terms of the ecosystem. And I completely agree that the universities should be a part of this. Even other stakeholders, I'm thinking insurance companies, if they really want that cut on insurance bills where people are healthy mentally and physically, where they have access to education. So there's a lot of stakeholders, but we leave them all out. And this kind of breaks the ecosystem down, because once you do the project, what happens next? How do you know that your project was sustainable? What was the impact that you did? And most projects just stop at the outcomes or outputs even, and leave it all to just organically happen. Like social integration, if you put a ball between two children, they will just organically get along. And this does not happen. There has to be some type of purpose, where you actually mean it. And there's a reflection session at the end of the session where you're asking the children, where do you want to go with this? How would you use this competence or life skill in your everyday life? So that's the problem with the ecosystem. It's not formally there, and it's really ruining the field. In terms of marketing, NGOs mostly market this as like a plus. It's not something important. It's not something as important as, for example, HIV prevention. It's not as important as education systems kind of getting children laptops. And they don't understand that sport for development is not only sport. Sport is play, physical activity, dancing, any sort of manual work. So really, the definition of sport takes a whole new meaning when you say sport for development, and this lacks in most schools and organizations. And in terms of marketing, sports is always competitive. It's always so raw, and sport for development is none of that. And this is where we also fail in marketing of projects and necessary media material that would let organizations and governments and even beneficiaries to join any program, sadly.
That is, that's all well and good. And I think we have, Brother Ato mentioned something in the beginning, that sport for development is not always positive. Sport for development sometimes is negative, even within the ecosystem. Ytannia would like you to speak to the people as to some of, and it's very interesting because this year I was able to do the sport and development org certificate, and I was very happy to do it because, and again, it was initiated, Brother Ato, by Mr. Mark Mongol, who said, Geoffrey, being a sport leader, you need to be able to understand S4D. And one of the first lines, one of the first modules that Ytannia was also a part of this program, was that sport for development is inherently good, but there are negative sides to it. And I am taken from what Brother Ato said and what also Sister Samia said. I am not too much into it, in the sense of I am not the go-to. And I want somebody who is a go-to to speak to the negative side of it. Ytannia, please share with us.
Ecosystem. Ecosystem really is a complex network of interconnected systems based on the physical environment. If you think of sport for development, it generally deals with a certain socioeconomic group. However, policies are set by another group. So when you spoke about earlier about marketing and not knowing about SDGs, he who knows it, he who feels it knows it. So if there's no need for you to be in a sport for development program based on your lifestyle where you live, it's not going to be something known to you. You understand? So yes, there lots of positive because it's inherently a positive thing. And when we talk about impact, when you're in sport for development, know what you're doing is you're planting seeds, the shade of trees, which you will never be able to sit under. That's what sport for development is. Planting now for then. However, when we're dealing about marketing and immediate returns are what's needed, and NGOs and NGBs necessarily can't measure that impact. And you keep asking about negatives. Some negatives I am going to talk about is going to be controversial because, as Samia said, some people use it as CSR, corporate social responsibility in their budget. Let's throw some money here. Let's go take a picture at the end of something and not necessarily take the time to invest in the actual development of it all. They come at the end to check their box. And to me, that further exacerbates the youth that we're working with. Because generally, when we talk about sport for development, and in my area, it's youth. And we've been flogging governments. And can I change it a bit, Jeffrey, if you don't mind? Because we keep talking about what should be. I want to speak to a system that actually worked, that actually took into the three things that Brother Atto spoke about, the organic passion. We work with a team of 45 facilitators, and the organic passion, it came from a wide variety. It came from sports people, it came from people in the culture, people in arts, different areas that had the passion. Then you spoke about the scientific process, and the Ganar program is very, we do a lot of M&E. So we actually do a lot of statistics. So I can speak to the fact that I know the impact of our program. 80% of the youth that come through our program leave secondary school with a certificate. If they'd not gone through the Ganar program, they would have left our secondary school system without any certification whatsoever. So think about the impact on the ecosystem, which is our society, when you then take these students who have no qualifications, put them out there for jobs against the same students that Atto is speaking about that have qualifications that can't even find jobs. So the ecosystem is based on where you sit and how you see things, your perception. And that's our scientific process. So we do a lot of data collection. I can say to you, because of taking the numbers, and a lot of NGOs may not always do this, but it's important for you to speak numbers, because if you're going to businesses, they speak numbers, numbers equal money. We have to think about it. And the third thing you said, the art of implementation. And I love that you said that, because you guys attended university with me in the Caribbean, and we are the greatest idea people in the world. Greatest. We go from idea, but you see the transition to implementation is generally where we fall down. So for Ganar, implementation for us meant making those ecosystems come together. Hence why we worked with the Ministry of Education, which is our government of Barbados, and our Ministry of Labor. Hence when we work with international agencies like IDB and USAID. Hence why we work with other NGOs in Barbados and the Caribbean. And that's how I met Mark. I met Mark working with Ganar, trying to implement it in Trinidad. I did training in St. Vincent as well. So what was big for me as the country coordinator was I kind of studied the landscape and all these barriers that we spoke about not having an ecosystem. I meant that wasn't going to happen. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was a deliberate action on my part and our team to bring those actors together. And I like what Atto spoke about money. You don't always need money. When we started, we went to companies and said, hey, you don't need to give us money. You need to give us time. You need to give us mentors. You need to give us. So when we went to the corporate social responsibility, it wasn't necessarily for money. It was more for you to give our youth internships in your business. And you know what we recognize is that these companies want to do stuff, but they don't know how or where to go. So we saw where the gap is, and we fill that gap. So those three things you spoke about made me smile, because we went through it systematically, and it's a lived experience and then you spoke about marketing. Let me talk about marketing, because when we first started, our program had a very negative connotation and stigma because it was for at-risk youth and it was seen for the not so bright students at our school. And some parents didn't want their children in the program. Some kids didn't want to be in the program. But when we start showing our impact on our results, it came a point where we had to then figure to get funding to take more students because the image changed. So marketing, yes, is also very important. But your results have to tie in to the ecosystem for the marketing to kind of pull it all together. So I just wanted to speak to a lived experience that can work. I know we always say you should do, but if you don't do, you'll just keep talking about you should do. So it was done and it could be done, but it's a deliberate process. And I am so taking your 3 things, Ado, because it was those 3 things that helped us build out a successful program in Barbados and in the region. So sorry to be so long-winded.
No. That's what it's about. It's really and truly about for us. And they see Brother Attorney Capit is really and truly about us. And somebody said it in the comments. This show shows her passion. And you're speaking the things, right? And you really and truly have to be able to be real. I remember speaking to Brother Atto about it. You know, we have to reach a stage in our conversations. We have to be real. We have to speak to our communities. We have to speak to ourselves. We have to speak to our teams, and we have to speak not from a leadership standpoint only, but to be able to hear from them so that they can be able to make an impact in any and everything that we do. So do in no way apologize for what you have said and for how long you took to say it, because this is exactly where we're at. We have just reached the hour mark. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and we'll be back. You're watching Futsal 868 Corner Talks, Sport and Development. What are we developing? And that is the question directly to our guests when we come back. What are we developing? And you could change that what to who, but nevertheless, let's answer the question. What are you developing? Sport and development. Futsal 868 Corner Talks. We'll be right back. One nation, one people, one Futsal 868. That's who we are. We speak futsal, social issues, and everything in between. Welcome to Futsal 868 Corner Talks. If you're joining us, we are speaking sport and development. And with us, we assemble the global Avengers. Barbados, Guyana, USA is here. But after who you are, tell me which character you are. Tell us which is your favorite.
I guess I'm gonna have to be the Black Panther.
Yeah. Samia, who are you?
Are we talking DC or Marvel?
Marvel.
Right.
Okay. You hit okay. You go ahead. You choose your character. You go ahead. Anyone?
I think I'm a bit of a Spider-Man. Still in my youth, still getting some experience here and there. but heading towards my goal, no matter what.
Ytannia.
I love that you said that. I actually got a card from my team and it had all Wonder Woman, and that's my favorite character. So I was like, because I always wonder why people complain. I always wonder why we can't do it. So that's why I'm Wonder Woman, and I want to get it done. Simple.
For me, I'm Hulk. I am mad scientist. I look like I can't mash hands, but as the old people say, I could kill Batchak. Just don't get me angry, right? I may love red, but just don't get me angry. For the right things, I will get angry. But nevertheless, thank you very much for indulging me in that. As we move on, guys, as the subtitle says, what are we developing? Sport for development, sport and development, sport development. What are we developing? Because many persons ask that question, even when it comes to national budgets being read. We spend X amount of money on this, we build this, we did this. But what are we developing? I start with Ytannia.
First off, sport for development looks different in different places and different spaces. And who or what varies based on the ecosystem that you're in. So for Ganar, we develop youth between the ages of 15 to 25 who were leaving school, and this is formal education.
Ytannia, before you continue, I just love how every single answer, Ytannia, is Ganar. Watch my laser focus. Laser focus.
Marketing, I gotta be on brand and on message. Come on.
Continue, darling, continue.
So when we talk about who, we knew who we were working with. So what I really want to say is different in different places and different spaces. Because for us, it was secondary school children, 16 to 24, leaving without qualifications or certifications. In Barbados, Ganar was in secondary schools. But when I went to Jamaica, Ganar was in certain places for certain youth. When we go to Latin America, Ganar was implemented because there were gang wars and boundaries. If I go to Lebanon, it's different there. So when we talk about it, your definition and who or what you're developing will always change. And we need to know it looks different in different spaces and different places, and the who or what varies always.
I thought you was going to say more than that. You had me.
I'm trying to get other people sometimes.
I'm not trying to catch myself. I will say you had more than that. It was
I do.
I was going to pull my bottle, drink a little water. I still had more than that. I say, all right.
I really do, but you wouldn't. And I can give my perspective, but I'm sure Samia in her space, it looks different for her, who she's developing. And Ato, for you too, is so different. I keep telling you, the common word is sport. That's the golden thread that runs through each of us. And it looks different. And nothing stops it from being different in different places. And the government should not shy away from putting sport for development in their policy because they can't concretely identify the ROI or the VOI on it. Yeah.
Samia, what are you developing? What is your organization or the organizations that you are part of developing? What or who, I should say?
In theory, sport for development can develop everything with everyone. It's just about how you use it, where you use it, and with who. So again, drawing on Ytannia's approach, it has to be very relevant to the people you are working with, or else it's not going to have any impact. With that being said, since we can use it everywhere and to develop anything, it still has some limitations, and this is where people kind of also lack the understanding of. It is not a magical tool for us to develop everything. It can complement some programs. It can complement existing programs and existing development. Activities, but it's not the magical thing to do in every place. Some people do not need that. For example, Ytannia brought up Lebanon. Lebanon has refugee and migrant problems. It has economical crisis. It had the August 4 blast. It had severe crisis since 2019, and sport for development was put aside because things like water, sanitation, and habitation have come first. So sport for development is not this magical tool that we can plug in everywhere and be like, okay, we're going to develop here and there and who. But mainly, sport for development is usually used, to develop youth, children, and it's really about empowering the actors, the local actors, rather than us being in every field, in every country, trying to teach S4D to youth and young people. So what do we do? Again, developing teachers, developing coaches, making them local actors, empowered local actors, and mainly it's youth who are now going to enter the work market, or children who lack psychosocial skills that would lead to integration and peace and violence prevention. Thank you.
Brother Atto?
It is difficult to follow the competence of my sisters, but I will attempt to anyway. So from a CSDA standpoint, remember I'm still representing myself, but from a CSDA standpoint, we see ourselves as contributing to the intellectual journey of sport for development. So we are thought leaders, and as such, we need to help to develop the ecosystem that I spoke of earlier. We need to develop competent actors that are able to engage communities and individuals in a quality way, offering a quality sport experience and a quality development experience. All right. From a UTT standpoint, because I'm there as well, I'm in the academy. I'm not of the academy. I'm a Rasta man, but I'm in the academy. So from the academy standpoint, we want to develop a research culture that will inform the actions that we take. We want to develop students that, again, can contribute to that ecosystem in a quality way. We want to influence policy, so we want to develop policy. And most of all, we want to develop a quality sport industry that will allow the qualities of sport for development to grow and be implemented throughout the country. And then personally, I just want to develop brothers and sisters all over the place. And I am not competent enough to develop anyone by myself, but if those people come with the willingness to be empowered, I will try my best to create an empowering environment, and hopefully that results in some good things.
Well said. You know, we always try to end the show by asking for solutions. But solutions come first whereby there's a problem. So I'm going to ask you all, in your learned manner, experienced manner, do you see a problem where you sit in your jurisdiction when it comes to sport development, and or sport for development, and with the problems that exist or may not exist? What are the potential solutions that you would suggest to, starting from the top, governments, national governing bodies, national sporting organizations, community organizations, and just persons like myself, a citizen? I start with Samia.
Well, in terms of problems in the world, it was a long question. I'll try to answer most of it. Well, in terms of problems, one is the democratization of S4D, being it a tool for everyone to know about, at least. So that would be the citizen part, the community part, the government, the government's part. So knowing about it is a huge step, I think, that would solve that type of issue. When we democratize this information and we make it open access to everyone, it's very easy then to go from a pre-contemplation stage of including sport for development in policies and in schools and in local communities, to a sort of contemplation or at least implementation phase. So here it depends on the community, on the government, and what they would like to do. But I think making it more accessible, making it more available to everyone can solve many of the issues that we face in sport for development. There's already a huge network that work in that field. And again, it's explicitly not out there for some reason, but we all know kind of who we are, who the group has as an internal network. But outside of that, there's nothing much about it. And a lot of people are like, oh, what's sport for development? And you try to explain it. And for them, it's something that where you compete, where you have some trophies, and you're just like, that's not it. And you try to explain. So democratization of the information and making it more open access, marketing it is a huge solution, I think, as a first step, at least.
We're not just yet to the end because we still have closing remarks. But with that being said, as a consultant, how can persons, organizations get in contact with Samia when it comes to find out more as to sport for development and peace, and how you can be able to serve them? What do you do to be able to do such?
Somewhat of an existential question right there. People can reach me usually by word of mouth from a certain network of people that already work in sport for development. And like I found out about this talk and you found out about me through LinkedIn. I'm quite active on there. I'm not very active on social media, but still you can get a hold of me somehow. What I really, really do and where my strength lies is one, that psychological approach to sport and sport for development. So there's always that background of, for example, trauma-informed activities or trauma-informed trainings and how to do them. And building capacities of coaches, which is always important in empowering the local actors to them be the direct contact with the beneficiaries that we would like to reach. And with that, building curriculums and anything monitoring and evaluation in S4D is down my alley. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Ytannia, problems, solutions, how can persons get in contact with you as well as Guyana?
My name is unique. You'll find it wherever. That's Ytannia. But I more want to talk about the Ganar program. Partners of the Americas is where the program is. So you can look us up. We're on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. So that's where you could connect with me. Problems. I want to talk about the future of sport and development. We need to turn these challenges into opportunities. So that's a problem. How do we do that? And I think certainly for sport for development, this crisis now represents for us, yes, challenges, but lots of opportunities. Because of the global recession and stuff like that, I think the future of sport for development, we really have a stake in the reopening or the development of how we're going to look going forward, especially for us smaller and less well-resourced actors. I mean, some may struggle to adapt and survive, but I think the crisis really presents for us the opportunity for the sector to increase in our profile. When we think about elite sports in the region, and definitely we've been hit really hard, we're on pause. But many sport for development programs are directly involved in relief efforts. So this is our time now, these actors, where we have to innovate and adapt our programming. And that's the beauty about sport for development. You can't adapt a 100-meter race. It is that and nothing else. But a sport for development program, you're reactive to the environment, yes? And you can engage communities. So I think it really marks an opportunity for us to gain greater recognition and visibility, where we can illustrate the value and the viability of sport for development policies and programs, and ultimately really promote the widespread use of these approaches. I think, yes, that's our challenge, and that's how we could do it.
Roberto, you go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you again for the opportunity. So I want to start off on a note that recognize some positive things. So you and Sister Ytannia spoke about doing the course in sport and development. I know some of the people that put together those courses, and I think it's a beautiful initiative. So that's positive. Uh, and there are other positive things happening, but yes, there are problems. And I think sometimes we get, as a society, we get obsessed with only the challenges, only the problems. And it's good to recognize those. Of course, it's necessary because that's the only way we can address them. But we should always keep that understanding that some things are okay, some things are working well. But some of the problems that I see, especially from a local context, I will try to do that. Local Trinidad and Caribbean. Underinvestment. And when I speak about investment again, not just money. Problematic partnerships between Caribbean organizations that implement sport for development and international quote unquote donor agencies. Those are two big problems. And the third problem, I would again revert to the lack of policy guidance in who can or who are competent actors in sport for development. And those are some serious problems that can defeat the efforts of quality sport for development actors by the sport for development being branded as a hoax, not a viable solution to address serious societal issues. So those are some of the problems, and how we can overcome some of that. I heard a really interesting quote recently. It says, if you're going to point out that the emperor is naked, you better be a decent tailor. And since I'm highlighting those problems, I'm going to attempt to posit solutions. We can work on some standards, some minimum standards that actors must meet, and they can get some licensure or something to operate as sport for development practitioners. So that's the last thing that I spoke about. The second thing is we need to get into the rooms with key decision makers. So that's a way the government can show that they're serious by having conversations with sport development leaders to really understand how they can assist even with meager resources. And we need to maybe go back to the negotiating table with these international donor agencies, because I genuinely believe they mean well, but we have competing interests. They have interests to satisfy their national agenda, and we have interests to serve the people, and those interests are competing, but they can overlap. So if we can have more of a genuine partnership with those types of agencies, as opposed to what I observed happen for the last 20 years or so, I believe that will go a long way towards solving some of the problems.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I would like to end this conversation on my end before I give each one of you all some closing remarks. That this is the hour in which we need to lead. And before this, the persons who are watching, whether you're watching live or the recorded version of this, before you guys are leaders, I'm very interested in this hour that we lead of uncertainty that the pandemic has created. I see that these leaders are operating in a disruptive context, a future that we don't really know. But what I am certain is that even though it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that if it is we listen to the solutions that are presented before us in terms of sport and development, sport for development, for sport development, we can definitely be better in the next hour, which is our future. With that being said, I ask each one of you for your closing remarks. I start with my Bayesian sister, Ytannia,
You love to throw me there, don't you?
all the time.
Like, I'm going to stick to the theme of what you said. I think the future of sport for development is at stake, like everything else. Let's just be real. Let's not pretend. And I think the consolidation of our power and our resources is where we're going to have to be very mindful, targeted, deliberate, very deliberate in what we do and how we do it. Good. And it's going to require greater commitment from our donors, partners, and our government, because you can't do it one without the other. Remember, it says sport for development, development for sport. Sport is a common thread. It's like it takes a village to raise a child. It takes several different communities to get this done in regards to, sport for development. So I really think that this crisis, the pandemic, has given us a leg up, and I don't know if we understand the opportunity we have as sport for development practitioners, that we can go in, and a lot of kids, a lot of people, a lot of families, a lot of communities are psychologically damaged from the last 2 years of this pandemic. We can use sport for development programs to rebuild those communities in a meaningful way. Yes? And I don't know if we as actors, as you guys say in the field, thought about it that way. Where is our key positioning right now? We're gonna have to get out there. I'm not gonna say elite sport isn't gonna be the first thing. It's part of, and we need to marry the two, and we need to be innovative. And it's clear that sport for development practitioners need to plan and mobilize for this new normal. There's no going back. End of story. It's about reducing risk and enhancing opportunities. And that, in my opinion, is what's urgently required of us.
So Maya, I hope that this is your first time virtually welcoming you to the Caribbean. I don't know if you have ever been, but you have
Never.
Guyana, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago represented. We welcome you to the Caribbean, and we hope it's not the last time that you're here virtually and physically with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
But more so for those who are listening, especially younger ones. And that's what our platform is being used for, not only to educate persons. LinkedIn, guys, get on. This is how we connect. And I got in contact with Samia through LinkedIn. And thank you very much for your words of wisdom and for being a part of us. It's a pleasure. Closing remarks, Samia.
Right. Well, LinkedIn is important. It depends how you use it. The network for S4D is a really supportive network wherever you are in the world. And that counts for upcoming actors wherever they are in the world. Building on what you said, Geoffrey, and what Ytannia said, although we're facing like a huge crisis and it's been 2 years, it's really important to really focus also on the positives, like Brother Atto was saying. The industry, the field has got some progress, and maybe not in the last 2 years, but in retrospect, it did somehow. And it's important also to count our victories somehow, whether we are new or old in the field. It's important to know that S4D is a growing field, and we just hope that it would become even bigger, even if the stability of it is at stake. Counting our victories is pretty important, especially in times of crisis.
Brother Atto, take us home.
All right,
Down
thank you.
that back stretch, pumping them arms.
All right. Thank you, brother, for the opportunity to share, but also the opportunity to meet these two genius sisters, passionate sisters, committed sisters. That is somewhat scarce in this environment where we're existing in a space that is highly commercialized, and everything, it's a me, grab me, this sort of environment. So to meet people that are still passionate about other people and committed to devoting their life to human and social development, it's always a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful to be in dialogue with all of you. My sister invoked an African proverb with which I'm familiar. She said, "We plant the trees that we will never benefit from the shade." And I want to share another African proverb from a program called MISA in Kenya, Habana Habana Ujaza Kibapa. And it means step by step we move forward. So as we leave, we need to remember that our purpose is important, our passion is genuine, and if we lose energy in running this race, people will be negatively impacted. So we need to keep that energy moving. We need to keep being committed and understand that habana habana ujaza kibaba, or as we say in Guyana, wan wan doti bill dam. So we will not change the world overnight, nor should we try to. Just make the little corner that in which we exist a little better than it was the day before, and keep doing that every day, and we will experience a great compounding effect that will reverberate around the world and hopefully create a better hour, as you aptly articulated.
As I run to the finish line to meet you, Atto, as you won us a gold medal, I just want to finish it by saying that of all, we do it with love. The verb, agape love, the purest form of love. So thank you very much to one and all for being on another episode of Futsal868 Corner Talks, where we spoke sport and development. And as I look towards my board, I think that next week we speak sport and tourism. It's just a continuation of the national budget. And be sure to tune in again at 4 p.m. ECT AST, whereby we bring to you sporting leaders, geniuses, another part of the Avengers that you can learn. Once again, it's our pleasure. We wish you a great week ahead. God touch his blessings. See you all soon. Bye-bye. Oh, before I leave, shameless plug. Each one of you all, go subscribe to our social media page. Even your three, our YouTube channel, subscribe to it. Because you will see why. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.
Storyblocks Audio.